Hello and welcome. My name is Mark Horseman, Data Evangelist with Dataversity. We would like to thank you for attending Dataversity Demo Day Data Governance. We're very excited to have you join us for this event set up to give you an overview of tools and services available for your enterprise data management programs. Just a couple of points to get us started. Due to the large number of people that attend these sessions, you will be muted during the webinar. For questions, we'll be collecting them by the Q&A section. If you would like to chat with us or each other, we certainly encourage you to do so. And just to note, Zoom chat defaults to send to just the panelists, but you may absolutely switch that to network with everyone. To open the Q&A or the chat panel, you may find the icons for those features in the bottom middle of your screen. And to answer the most commonly asked question, as always, we will send a follow-up email to all registrants within a couple of business days containing the slides. And yes, we are recording, and we'll also send a link to the recording of this session, as well as any additional information requested throughout the webinar. And welcome to our second session with Satori and Adam Galding. Adam is a solution architect at Satori. At Satori, Adam is helping customers implement data security controls on databases, data lakes, and data warehouses. Adam has been in and around the data space throughout his 20-plus year career. He's worked with companies large and small and prides himself in building creative solutions for technical problems. With that, I'll hand the floor over to Adam. Hello, Adam.
Hello. Thank you for that introduction. It's hard to hear 20 years and at this point in time in my life. But I've been doing this for a bit. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get things started. So, like Mark said, I'm a solution architect here at Satori, and we'll just go ahead and skip to the next slide here. Pretty much everything that Mark said about me. Been in this space for quite some time. I started as a BI developer, did a lot of BI consulting, a lot of work in the data space, and then now I find myself on the sales side of things, talking to companies about their data and how they get access to all that, and I enjoy having those conversations. So the plan of action today is really spend the bulk of the time demoing to you guys and showing you off Satori, but I always find it helpful to kind of set talk about it, set the groundwork, the framework about what we're talking about. So I do have a handful of slides that we'll go through relatively quickly before we jump into the demo. So with that, we'll jump into things. So any kind of cursory Google search or look into data governance, you'll see a slide similar to this. You'll probably see, you probably maybe seen this today or have seen this in your lives, right? But there's really kind of like 5 key principles to data governance that when you're talking about that you're kind of looking into, right? It's like ownership of the data, accessibility to the data, security of the data, the quality of the data, and then, knowledge of who's using and all that around the data. And with Satori, we really kind of add to the data governance, really in all 5 kind of portions of that. But what we really see is the key um, pillars that we add to with our product are really around accessibility and security. So that's what I'm going to spend most of my time on today when showing you the platform, is highlighting how we make it really easy for data teams to apply granular security access to their data, and how we make it really easy for not only people to browse and ask to get on board with data through the accessibility, but also how we kind of make it easier for DBAs, for security teams to kind of manage that and get people on board. So again, we kind of touch a little bit of all these different five pillars, different 5 areas, but we're really going to focus today mostly on the security and accessibility. And the reason why Satori kind of came into existence is that we see that, scaling secure and compliant data usage is really hard. A lot of the customers I talk to are either doing it at the product or at the database level, and then that's creating a lot of headaches, a lot of hassle with going out to these individual systems and setting up different rules and permissions, understanding how they view security or how things are implemented in that. Or sometimes they're using a piecemeal solution. Maybe it's something they developed in-house that doesn't necessarily cover all their use cases, or they're using a combination of different tools that doesn't really cover, again, all their data sources and all that. So it's really hard for a lot of companies when you're talking about like tens of, 20s of 30s different data sources of managing that secure access, making sure that they're compliant, that they're up to date, and that they can be flexible with the needs of data consumers and how people access the data. So that's really kind of where Satori comes in. We give you a business driven way to apply security and compliance across all your different data applications and data sources. And we do that all under one kind of UI, and this is what we call the Satori Management Console. And what that does is it lets you enforce these policies to all those disparate data sources. And I'll probably highlight this a few times as we're talking, but the idea is that, as you have many disparate different kinds of data sources, your snowflakes, your Databricks, your Postgres, your SQL servers, it's hard to kind of maintain not only security on those systems, but maintain the same kind of security across all those systems, right? So that's where we kind of come in and we make it really easy to be able to do that all in kind of one UI. And the other thing is for all those kind of applications like your Tableaus and your Lookers and your Power BI and all those kind of BI reporting tools and all that, they will inherit all of those security policies from those data sources. So, as users are looking at dashboards or looking at reports, they'll go back and query those databases, and those databases will have those security policies in place. And so those will filter down or flow down to the end user. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. That's kind of what we're going to highlight. And that leads me to my next slide. And really, this is kind of looking at those two pillars. What I really want to highlight and talk to you about in the demo is in regards to security, we're going to show you that centralized management. That's all through our management console and how easy it is to go and set that up. We're going to talk about role and attribute-based access control. So not only controlling access at that group, at that role level, but also looking at maybe user attributes like maybe like a location of where the user's from, or some other kind of value or attribute that was assigned to that user from your IDP or whatever Okta Entra ID that's assigned to that user, and using that to kind of help filter, help guide the security. We'll talk about row and column level security with that, and also masking and how easy it is to set up masking, and then auditing. Right, that's a big thing that a lot of our customers want to know about and want to see how we can do and enable. More and more companies are getting more scrutiny on who gets access to data, how much data is accessed, and all that. And so having these kind of built-in auditing features, having this really robust auditing log really just enables our customers to be able to answer those kind of questions. And so that's on the security side. And on the accessibility side, we'll talk about the data portal. It's the easy to use way for a user to kind of gain or request access to data with that self-service access. We'll talk about, our automated credential expiry, how you can go in and set up when you're setting up users to automatically expire in a certain amount of time and have it revoke after a certain amount of time. And then we'll talk about user access history and auditing a little bit on that. So again, just wanted to use this as kind of a roadmap of what we're going to highlight. And so as I talk about these different features, you can see kind of which buckets they fall into and all that. So without further ado, let's jump into the demo. And the way I like to run these demos is I like to start with the end state first and work our way backwards. So with Satori, we really have two kind of big pillars that we want to do for our end users. One is to give that centralized way of managing those security policies across disparate data sources, and make it really easy, make the uplift of doing that, the hassle, I would say, easier for all of our customers. And the second is to be virtually invisible to our to data consumers. And you can see that present here in this Tableau workbook that I have here. So in the olden days, I will say, when I started my career, you would just give a user based off of a role or the user themselves access to a database, and that's it. So I could see any kind of data in there, whether it's secure, PHI, PII, PCI. I just know I have access to every single bit of data in there. And sometimes they would filter it down to a schema and maybe a table, but most of the time it's like, hey, you're a data analyst, you have at it, have at it. Here's the whole database for you. And when we're talking about companies that are interested in, their service area for secure data and how to manage and make sure secure data doesn't get out, that way of doing it and the way I kind of grew up in doing this doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? And we now have tools to kind of narrow down that surface area to make it more secure and to do things like you see here, which is hide sensitive data. So I, as a data analyst or as a report user dashboard viewer, don't need access to this sensitive data for whatever this report's for. It looks like it's a person lookup, but let's say it's a account of customers by state, right? I don't need to know their email addresses or the social security number or their birthday or any of that kind of stuff. So this is a little bit of a paradigm shift for some companies because they're not used to thinking about data security in this granular matter, thinking about it at the column level and at the row level on what I want people to do. So this is kind of what we're reaching for, right? Is this going in and redacting this data? Here we've set it up to hide the domain from the email address. We're not doing anything to states. Addresses, we're hashing. Basically, hashing lets us keep state, lets us keep the uniqueness of the value if we ever need to join it to another data set. We're obfuscating all but the last two of the social security number. And then with phone number, we're completely redacting it with a separate string and so on and so forth. And these are all different settings that you can do and set up inside of Satori. And this is just one of many tools that we work with, right? I just opened up Tableau because I was demoing it a little bit earlier. But if we're inside of Databricks, you can see the same kind of redaction going on, where we're hiding the domain from the email addresses and the addresses we're hashing. We're keeping the state the same, and we're going in and hiding different pieces of that data. So whether you're using a tool to access the data like a data grip or a DB Beaver or Snowsight or SQL editor inside of Databricks, or if you're using a report like a Tableau or a Power BI or Looker or so on and so forth, your end users are going to be able to access the data in the way they're used to accessing it through these tools, but also you're going to see that security, those masking, those policies are getting filtered down to the end user, and you're able to apply those security policies and limit the kind of sensitive data that those users can see. So again, just kind of showing you where we're going, what the end state would look like for that. So the question is, how do we get here? How do we start building this out? And so this is all done through the Satori management console. So the management console is our UI for setting up these different security policies. And I'll take one step back and talking about Satori. So Satori is a very modern application we run on Kubernetes, which gives us a lot of flexibility in the way we're deployed. So we can be deployed as a full SaaS application, or we can be deployed in our customers' either VPCs or inside their own infrastructure. So that gives us a lot of flexibility for our deployments. And in that, we have a data access controller that is going to be the one that's actually implementing, doing these security policies, pushing it out to the databases. And then we have the management console, which is, like I said, the UI around that. In this management console, you have the ability to do a lot of different things and a lot of different tools. We have the high level dashboards, posture manager, access reports, and audit log. And I group these into what is going on with my data now. So this gives you insight in, how much data have I classified in here? How much data that are people querying that are personal identifiable information, or personal health information or whatnot. And this is all part of Satori's, I would say, maybe secret sauce and the way we classify data and group it together. You can see the top queries, who's running the most queries in here. You can see my coworker Guy runs a lot. The number of queries, what sensitive data is coming up in those queries are all captured here in the dashboard. And we can go into it in more detail in the audit log and the reports. So a big um, group bucket of what you can do inside this management console is, hey, understanding what's going on, who's accessing data, what kind of sensitive data is being accessed to Satori. And uh, the other bucket of things that you can do inside the management console is setting up a new data source, right? Onboarding these new masking security policies and all that. And with that, I'm going to jump into a data set. So there's going to be a little bit of vocabulary, but it's not a hard uplift. So when I think of a data set, I think of it as a data product. So this is basically the end user grouping of data sources that you want your consumers to use, right? So I always think about these as maybe like a department level or maybe at a like report level or something like that. So, this my secure data sources that we see here, you can think of this as HR data, maybe as sales data, maybe as profit and loss data, or whatever you want it to be. It's just a grouping of disparate different data sources that are grouped together into one kind of data product. And you can see that here inside of the data stores included. So we have 12 different data stores that we're leveraging here. And these are data sources that don't normally talk to each other. We have Snowflake, Synapse, Redshift, Postgres, SQL Server, BigQuery, Cockroach, S3. There's a whole bunch of different data that has all this kind of same similar data that we want to bring in into a single data product. The great thing about the way we've architected our data stores is that you can add data at different levels of granularity. So you can see for like Postgres and like Redshift, we're doing it at like the server level of that data. So that means any kind of databases, tables, schema and tables underneath it will automatically be included in the data set. But you can see here for like the Synapse, we're going into a specific table. So if you, and like a lot of our customers do, have a mixed use database, as I would call it, that maybe has a combination of HR and sales data, you can go in and specify what specific tables you want to include into your data product, or you can specify what pieces of data you don't want to include in your data product. So we give you that different levels of granularity for building out those data products in here. And really, this is where you start seeing the value of Satori, right? Because I want you to imagine going into each one of these different databases, right? And making the changes that we're making here, going in and applying those redactions, going in, adding a new user and all that, revoking access to user. Like this could take, a day, if not a couple days of a DBA's time to go in and do all this work. And we're able to do it, seamlessly through our UI and make it really easy. So we've gone ahead and we set up our data product, this My Secure Data Sources. We've specified what databases and tables we want to include on it. Next is what security policies do we want to apply to it, right? How do we want to secure the data? So jumping into security policies, you can see that we have two security policies set up to be the default for this data. And so I'll show you what the main security policy looks like. And you can see here, a security policy is made up of two things. One is dynamic masking rules. And so this is going to be the same stuff that we saw here, where you specify how you want data to be redacted, and data filtering, right? So this is going in and applying filtering at the row level. So looking at the data itself and saying that, hey, maybe this HR person can't see accounts for managers and hire, and filtering out the managers, hires, VPs, CXOs level out of there. Or maybe you want to do it by geolocation, filtering the data out from there. So again, giving you a lot of flexibility in the way you build your security policies and how you want to apply those granular filters. But with a security policy is a combination of these masking rules and this data filtering. So jumping into the masking rules, I'm gonna jump over to my masking profiles tab that I thought I had open. It looks like it's not, so I'll open it real quick. You can see here, this is the masking that we've set up for our data sources. So, the PII redacted, the LPI redacted, these are things that we're seeing here inside of this data that's being applied to the data. One thing you'll see here in our masking is that we're not specifying a specific table, a specific column to mask. We're using what we call classifiers or tags on that data, right? So what we do is as data gets queried, as data flows through Satori, we're able to either apply our out of the box masking or out of the box classifiers in real time to the data, or we're actually able to go in and apply custom classifiers to the data to help enable masking. The benefit to this is, let's say we're talking about HR data, because I think everyone can kind of wrap their heads around HR data. Let's say someone added a new piece of data into the table. Maybe they uploaded a CSV file or they added a new data source, and it had social security numbers in here. If you had to go in and specify it for each instance of the social security number, you'd have to go in here and edit this and add it and all that kind of stuff. And there's the ability to maybe miss a piece of data. But looking at the classification level, what we're able to do is say, oh, this looks like a social security number. We're going to go ahead and apply the masking rules to this. So whether you have social security number once or many times in this data set, we're going to apply the same masking to it. So again, taking that kind of abstract look at it just really helps data teams, helps your data masking and security be flexible as you're onboarding different data sources. And again, you can see all the different kinds of masking that we have with the replace the string or hashing or what have you with it. So a lot of flexibility in the way you can set up your masking. So the other piece is the data filtering, and talked about that a little bit. So I'll go into a little bit more detail. So at the data filtering, our customers do want to see it at that granular, that column level. So we give you the ability to do that here. And in the filter, we give you the ability to filter based off of user, group, IDP group. So think of this as Okta Intra ID group. We give you the ability to filter based off of user attributes here. You can see that specified here. So a lot of flexibility in the way that you can go in and set up how you want your data to get filtered. Obviously, these are all, if the user is, but we also have if the user is not and all that, if that makes more sense to kind of build these different classifiers. And where we see this with is a lot of, customers trying to do it around like geolocation, or maybe doing it around, different attributes that the users have and all there. So giving you that kind of flexibility. So as users query the data, you can say that, hey, this person, because of this, doesn't get access to see this kind of data and all that, and giving you those. So that's your security policies, right? Your combination of masking and row level filtering that you apply to this data set. The next thing you want to do is you want to give users access to that data. And so we really have two buckets that we give users that I consider for user access. One is going to be more like, I know this user because of their group or whatever will need access to this data. And so it's maybe more static, it's less likely to change. And maybe it's going to be something that's persistent over time. And in that way, you're able to grant user access based off the user, the group, or the intra Okta ID group level in here. We give you the ability to set your kind of level of access. You can set read write all the way up to full. And then one of the benefits in our tool that I'm not seeing a lot of places is the expiry, right? So I can set it to expire within, 30 days, 14 days, or whatever. So let's say that we have a group of auditors coming on, right? So, and they're in the audit group. If that, we don't have an audit group in here. I'm just using for an example. Well, that doesn't want to listen to me today. Audit. We have them in an audit group, and then we want to say that we know they need access for the data for 30 days. So we're going to have this automatically expire in 30 days. So that means you don't have any kind of left open ways of accessing data. We'll go in and expire that access automatically. What typically happens is that a DBA or a security person will have to remember, or another ticket will get open up and they just get blind. They get just a bunch of noise around all that. This is something that we can handle automatically inside Satori. We can also set it to automatically revoke. So let's say that those users never get onboarded, those auditors don't get onboarded for whatever reason, we can set it to automatically revoke if they never use the login within 7 days. Again, cleaning up all that kind of noise that DBAs usually get for user access, access rules, and all that kind of stuff. One of the things we also do is you can specify what kind of security policies you want to enforce. So you can either have it set to use those default security policies they walk through, Or you can have it set up like, hey, I know this group needs a specific security policy, maybe that's more lenient or more strict. You can go in here and set it to be that specific policy. And then when you add it, they'll have that policy versus the default. So we give you that kind of flexibility with how you onboard your users in your groups. So that is, a more persistent user, a user that's always going to need access to the data. The other is the user access request. And, we're in this accessibility part of the data governance. User access requests are letting users get access through to data either via our self-service portal or data portal or through the APIs we have around that. And we really kind of have that request access into two buckets. And let me open up the data portal for you guys to show you kind of what that looks like. So the data portal is a UI that we built for users to go out and see what they have access to and what data sets they are able to go in and request access for. In here, it stores your temporary credentials you can use to log on to those data sources. So if you're someone like me, don't remember your password, I can go in here and copy it and as I need to be able to connect to those things. So for user access, you can see that we have two different buckets here. The first is the user access request rule. These are access that requires someone to approve it. It's whether it's a data steward or someone else to go in and approve that data access. And the other bucket is self-service access. This is data that only or access that's maybe read only or less permissions and maybe for a smaller amount of time. And you're able to specify what users can request access or what users can go in and self-service access. So you can see here inside the data portal for this, what is a good one for me? Let's request access for this client data. You can see that I have three different ways I can request access. So I have that self-service way of requesting access. And again, it was set up here for me to be able to leverage that. And this will let me read only for about 30 minutes. And then if I want, a little bit longer time, or if I want greater access, I can go in and ask for one that actually sends an email out to the data steward or the person in charge of approving it and approve my access here. Here I can give it a purpose from one of the ones that we've set up, and then I can ask for it like, I need this for, X client report or whatever, and be able to fill this out, hit request, and that goes out to get approved. So this is really making it easier for users to discover data, to access and get to access data versus the old way of, going in and filling out tickets or maybe in the worst case scenario, slacking the DBA to get access and all that kind of stuff. And the great thing about all of this is it's auditable, right? So as users go in, request, get access revoked, all that data is in here is stored inside of our logs. So you have insight into, who's getting access revoked, who's updating access. You can see here I've updated our Active Directory users, and the ones that go in and request access. You can see, what code they used, and then the message behind it and all that. So we're capturing all this kind of data for user access inside of Satori that you can use to give to auditors or give to your managers, and you can really understand how users are going in and accessing that data. So that's user access, again, the accessibility part of the data governance. The last thing I'll kind of go into is, and I think we're kind of getting close to my time, is our audit log, right? So inside of Satori, we have this really robust audit log that we can see how users are going in and requesting and getting data in here. And so you can see detailed information like who's accessing it and where they're from. So you guys can see that I'm based out of Richardson, Texas. My IP address. Probably shouldn't be sharing this on our Zoom, but whatever. What security rules and stuff that I'm running into, what data stores I'm running into and all that. And all this kind of information, what does the query look like that we're accessing in here? I'm looking for a better one to show you guys. What does the query look like in here? And you can see in this query, we're actually hiding sensitive data even from our own audit log. So anything in like a having or a where or group by, anything that could have sensitive data, we're actually going in and hiding those pieces of data even from our audit log. So you don't have to worry about that sensitive data getting out. See what data store it is, see what classifiers are coming up in that query and all that kind of information and data. So really just taking a step back with Satori, the goal is to make it really easy for our customers to manage all those disparate data sources and one easy to use UI where it's easy to kind of set up these different security policies, make data access, make data security more granular for our users, and ultimately make it a lot easier for everyone. So that's the bulk of what I wanted to cover with our demo today. I'm happy to open it up for questions. Mark, if there are any that came through.
We got a couple in Q&A but uh, chat, feel free to add any questions that you're interested in here. We have one from a questioner here. When detecting date of birth, can you can you not just hide data but obfuscate it or change it by an algorithm? So he's saying when detecting date of birth, can you set it to date of birth plus or minus a secret value for analysis so that it's no longer PII?
That's a great question. I haven't dug really deep into the different ways we can go in and set the classifier. So obviously we have a hash redact in here. We can mask everything except it looks like specifically for date of birth, we have a set to a generic number or show only the year. I don't see a way of going in and applying like a calculation to that, but I there could that could be a blind spot on me with with our product. So I can definitely double check that, but I don't think we do if I'm going off of what I see here.
Okay. We've got a really interesting question here. Not that the last question wasn't interesting.
Fair enough.
Given that the best practice for BI tools like Power BI, Tableau is to connect to data sources under a system or service account rather than
Mhm.
like pass through authentication, although some folks do pass through as well. Um, how can Satori make these BI tools like inherit the rules-based access controls applied by the user role in the data sources if you're using like a service account?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a question that we get a lot, right? Um, Obviously, and this goes against your question of the best practices, which I'm not sure if I would consider this not best practices. But the easiest way is obviously for the user to authenticate in the BI tool like Power BI or Tableau and have that pass through to the data source. And that could be done through a couple of different ways. That could be done through an OAuth credential or even some like initial SQL, if I'm getting a little into the weeds, to pass that in. So that's the easiest way of doing it, is authenticating the user on the BI tool and then passing that into the data source so we're able to apply those masking, those row level filtering policies. Where it gets a little complicated is for people that want to do things like where they cache or import mode in some of these tools and stuff like that. And with that, we do have another solution, which is we're able to export these different security policies into an entitlements table and then use that inside of those tools. So as the user is authenticating those tools, we're able to join that data to the entitlements table, and that will help uh, enforce those different security policies to the users accessing it. And again, we see that a lot on people that are using reports in import mode rather than direct mode. So there's a couple different ways that we can kind of handle that situation. Those are just really the two big buckets that I kind of run into a lot. But the truth behind all of it is it's usually working with the customer, seeing how they have their specific instance set up, and working with them inside of their security guidelines to be able to make it work. But we have made it work for a lot of customers. So hopefully that answers your question, Gabrielle.
We've got another question here. Does Satori's solution support implementation of security restrictions around data usage, like beyond access control? For example, inhibiting a user from copying, replicating, extracting, or downloading data that the user has access to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So currently now we're mostly focused on user access. So the beyond access stuff is a little bit out of our scope on preventing users from being able to download and pull that data in. With our with Snowflake and Databricks, that gets a little bit muddy because we're using some inherent features inside of those that could extend to some of those beyond access rules. I would have to do some more digging into seeing how those are affected by having our grants and roles in place that we push down to there. So there might be some kind of overlap in doing that, or some protection in doing that, but I'll say generally that is out of scope for us. And the kind of the beyond access, it's really managing who can get access to data, and what kind of the read write kind of access to that.
So because we've got all the rules in this tool, and this tool allows you to implement different masking and other rules, typically in organizations you see that related to specific policies around use of data or protection of PII or what have you. In Satori, does it can you directly link or reference or group things by organizational policy? Um, does that make sense?
I think a bit, really, I think there's kind of two ways I think this answer can go. One is, and I'll give you both, and you can tell me if I'm getting close to either of them. One is the idea of that data set, right? That data product that you build to be able to um, you build around, a particular, I would say, business need around here. So, again, HR data for HR reporting and HR analytics, sales data for sales, analytics and all that kind of stuff. So you can build any of these kind of data products and give users access to it in that way. So that's one way of kind of classifying, grouping together data into a single place for people to go and consume. The other way is, we could be talking about classification and how we're able to go in and identify data and apply these different classifiers to it. But I think this might be a little bit more granular than the way you're kind of getting it, Mark, where we're able to see, like, if I jump into where is my, I like to show name on here, address, uh, personal name. You can see here that across all the data sources we have onboarded here, we can see how many of these different classifications are being tagged with person name. And again, we're not necessarily looking at the column name on here, although a lot of these have the name in here. But I had a customer earlier that has NM as the column name, so it wasn't something we're able to do. We look at the data itself, not the name. But you can also see at the classification level, what columns and what data uh, fall under that classification. So I think the data set's probably closer to the answer to your question, but do any of those make sense to you, Mark?
Perfectly, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And while you've got this screen up, it's kind of neat to see all the data stores that you connect to as well.
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah,
I'm
I
sure
can,
our
I can
attendees find that interesting.
Yeah, I'll so a bunch of different data stores that we can connect to here. Fabric is coming really, really soon. Again, we support, Synapse and Power BI, so a lot of Fabric is just bringing those together. AI is big on our roadmap. We have some really cool, interesting things with AI coming, both protecting it as a source of data, protecting data that's going out to AI, so making sure, like, sensitive data is not getting queried to, chat gpt, or not sending bad commands to chat gpt, like ignore all and stuff like that. And then also monitoring, data that's coming back from those, and making sure that that stuff's secure.
We do have a follow-up question from an attendee here. Can classifications be classified themselves as being related to a policy? So what information can we store about classifications themselves?
That's a great. Okay, so can classifications be classified themselves as being related to a policy? So with the policies, we trying to figure out the best way to answer this. So really with classification in terms of organizational in relation to organizational policy. I'm trying to wrap my head around the question. I'm sorry. So with classifiers, we're really looking at patterns of data. So to me, it doesn't make sense for a classifier to be derived from some kind of organizational policy. But you can have like, let's say like in here we have a patient scheduling policy, right? So this is a high level policy that's made up of multiple dynamic masking rules and data filtering on the data. So you can have like these policies at a high level, at a higher than classification level that can contain, what to do with different data in the classifiers. And again, you can add these policies to your data sets, either you know, you can add one or many to it if it makes sense. So it's a little bit different way of thinking about it, but I would say that at the organizational policy level, I would look at it at this security policy level, and then inside would have what you want to do to data that's classified, and then how you want to apply that kind of row level security to that data. Hopefully that kind of answers the question a bit. Um, that was the one I had to kind of think about for a second. So hopefully I got close to that one.
Our audience is on the ball today.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like tough questions.
Well, thank you very much, Adam, for this great presentation. I'm afraid that's all the time we have slotted for this session. Thanks to the attendees who have joined us so far. We now have a break where we encourage you to network with each other as you hear us get the next speaker set up, and the next presentation will begin right at the top of the hour. Thanks again, Adam.
Thank you. Appreciate it.